Joel, thanks so much for having us. This is our second episode with you, but the first one in person, and this one's special just because we're finishing up our road trip and finishing up at the right spot, Polyface Farms. So thanks for having us.
We're delighted for you to be here, and it's an honor.
Yeah, the Zoom podcast is always good, but you just don't get that same dynamic that you get in person, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we learned that during COVID, didn't we?
Mm-hmm. We really did.
Everybody just missed. We're social beings. We like to touch and hug and kiss and all sorts of cool stuff.
Yeah, we touched on that a little bit in the first podcast about how you actually saw a resurgence of interest in sort of what you were up to because of COVID. People were starting to show up on the farm and wanted to get a little bit more back in touch with what's happening with the food system, especially with the shock that happened during COVID.
I think I think one of the most interesting things about where we are right now is that for decades, this is kind of a new thought I've had, and I'm putting it in a new book that I'm working on. But that for decades we've sold ourselves on the notion that that true freedom comes from not participating in the mundane things of life. Growing tomatoes, canning squash, butchering a chicken, gathering eggs, even cooking in your kitchen. That if you really want to be free, you let somebody else take care of that. You get Hot Pockets and Lunchables and you let somebody else, you get Uber Eats and you let somebody else take care of that. What we learned in the black swan of COVID, on several levels. First in 2020, when the store shelves went bare, and everybody was panicking. And now with the war in Ukraine, with the price of fertilizer quadrupling, wheat, and supply chains fragmenting, what we now realize is that true freedom comes from participation. Those of us who didn't buy fertilizer and made compost instead. Those of us who didn't buy from the store and had our gardens instead. Those of us who canned and developed a larder, of stored goods. We could eat for 6 months without going to the store. And so here we were kind of, marginalized, philosophically marginalized by the culture for all these decades. And suddenly we find out that true freedom comes from participating in the mundane parts of life, which is, of course, what's driving the homestead movement.
Such an interesting topic to explore, and it's something that's very close to both Harry and I too, because up to COVID, I was living in New York, Harry was living in Boston. We're working these corporate jobs. You have a plethora of restaurants and grocery stores and things like that, and we've kind of outsourced everything that you're talking about. And then the COVID situation hits, and I've never really connected or met a rancher before, and I don't even know where I would get a lot of the food and things that you're talking about. So It's been fascinating just to see that progression.
Yeah, and of course we've seen it. We've seen it here. I mean, people have actually asked me, "Do you sell food insurance?" I've never heard of food insurance. We have flood insurance, fire insurance, car insurance, health insurance. We have all sorts of it, but food insurance, and it just indicates the concern that people have about food sourcing and food security, and the ultimate security is your personal participation in that. Everybody can't grow everything they eat. We certainly don't either. But if you can get some of the staples, in your backyard and from your hanging herb pipe, the pocketed pipe in your patio, maybe a beehive of honey on the rooftop, whatever. Anything that you can do like that is as secure as you can get.
It feels like we're experiencing somewhat of a cultural shift around what's happening in the food system. I don't know if you've experienced that from your perspective.
Sure. Well, I'm seeing it both directions. The old Hegelian, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, and so yes, we're seeing a definite resurgence of domestic culinary interest. I mean, canning jars, canning lids are selling 4 times as much as they did 4 years ago. People who sell seeds to gardeners are triple sales, can't keep up. So that's really cool on the one end. And on the other end, then we have the Bill Gates group that's trying to eliminate livestock, go to synthetics, lab produced fake materials, as if that's going to be the future. And so I see both elements kind of growing at the same time, and that's actually fairly typical.
Absolutely. One of the things that we were talking about prior to hitting record is we were talking about some of the original books that you had written in the mid-90s and how we were almost surprised at how relevant a lot of those themes still are in 2022. And I was just thinking, from the lens of a customer, is there a difference in someone that was buying from Polyface in the 90s versus someone that's buying from you guys today? Like, do you find customers to be a little bit more informed and come to you with more information? I'm just curious if you ever thought about that before.
No, I think in general, I think overall they're very, very similar. Mm-hmm. I mean, they don't want to get Tyson chicken; they want to get clean chicken. They don't want chemicals. They want all this. But the biggest change we've seen in customers is just culinary ignorance. When we started 50 years ago, everybody knew how to cut up a chicken, for example, knew how to make a hamburger. We've got customers that ask us, how do you make a hamburger? The level of culinary ignorance is truly profound. And I'm not trying to be condescending or disparage anyone. It's just remarkable what I've watched in 50 years, the erosion of culinary knowledge, so that you're not intimidated by a recipe. You're not intimidated by a new thing. Oh, sure, yeah, we'll go in and there's a lot of experience and kind of what we say pre-understanding. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you've never boiled water in the kitchen, and you even pick up a recipe book, it's a little bit intimidating. There's a bit of pre-understanding there. What does it mean to roll flat? Well, how flat is flat? There's a lot of pre-understanding there. And what we've gotten to in our culture now is as we have become dependent on convenience and processed foods, we have lost even those very basic culinary kind of pre-understanding. It's really quite profound. So we realize we have to give recipes. We have to explain to people how do you use this. And of course, when it comes to meat, our favorite thing's a crock pot. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's like bulletproof.
Yeah.
If you're going to grill steaks, there's a little bit of art to that. Mm-hmm. But there's no art to throwing a piece of meat and some potatoes and carrots and onions in a crock pot and walking away all day. You come back at whether you come back at 4, 5, 6, or 7, it's not burnt. It just sits there and just percolates all day. It's like the ultimate risk-proof from scratch cooking deal you can do.
He's speaking your language.
Yeah, totally. I'm about to jump out of my seat. That's my favorite way to cook, because you can't mess it up. And
right.
Yeah, it's easy.
And it takes the least amount of energy.
Right.
40 watts, less than a light bulb, and it just sits there all day.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate no time cooking.
Mm. This the idea of us not really having any of these culinary skills is really interesting, because it's kind of reflective of this entire theme of just outsourcing all of our skills to other places. I mean, you can probably extrapolate that to so many different areas of modern culture, but it couldn't be more relevant to just preparing food, which is actually pretty scary when you think about it. Like, where are our skills going?
Yeah, well, that's right. Where are our skills going? And so that's why now, I mean, look at the proliferation of cooking shows. Look at the interest in just workshops. Goodness, I'm involved with numerous informational, farm food fair type platforms, and the cooking stuff, always cooking, butchery, that kind of thing, just homemade, charcuterie, making your own bologna, summer sausage. I mean, those workshops just fill up in a heartbeat.
They sell out quickly.
They sell out very, very quickly. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, because we're really a nutrition podcast by trade. And, we've talked about the carnivore diet, the keto diet, paleo, eating real foods. But I think the number one thing that we always go back to is like, if you just start cooking the majority of your meals, you're going to be such a better spot compared to 99% of the population. And it's a shame we don't know what good food tastes like anymore. And a lot of these dishes are so simple, just knowing how to sear a steak or bake a chicken or butter base something. It's not incredibly complicated, but I guess we just have lost that art for whatever reason.
Yeah, we've lost, and I'm glad you said art, because it's science and skill, but there's also an artistic element to it. And I think one of the main reasons people are scared of it is because they don't want to make a mistake, and they don't want to burn the house down. They don't want bad smells. They don't want to smoke up send the fire alarms off, and so the the intimidation factor overrides the inquisitive factor, and that's unfortunate. I encourage people, look, just start with something, and all journeys start with one step. And you crawl before you walk, and there's plenty of metaphors for that. But we all know people who just seem to be, well, like my wife Teresa. She just, it's like a miracle every day. And this just appears on and it seems effortless. I know it's not.
Yeah,
but it seems effortless, and it's like anything. You start into it. And you develop techniques, shortcuts, all sorts of skillful ways, and it becomes way, way easier.
Yeah. How do you and Teresa like to eat? Do you call it a diet? Do you just think about eating real foods or prioritizing animal protein?
We just eat what we've got. We literally eat what we've got, and so we do eat a lot of meat. I do think that our bodies are, we have different genetics, and some people are more conducive to some things more than others. Think about milk, dairy. That's a kind of a big one. Some people have a little more problem with it than others. For me, I'm a meat and fruit. I can live on meat and fruit. I love bread, but I could go the rest of my life and not eat bread.
Right.
Sourdough, that's a little different story. But anyway, we have sausage and eggs and milk, and so that's what we eat for breakfast. And supper we pretty much eat out of the garden. If we have, she has always canned several hundred quarts of stuff. So our larder's in the basement, and last night she said, "Go get me a jar of green beans and peaches and tomato juice." So I went to the cellar and brought up 3 quarts and supper. We just basically eat from what we have.
Let's take a minute to talk about some of the sponsors and brands who support the show.
Who are you thinking?
I was thinking about Carnivore Bar. What are your thoughts on Carnivore Bar?
It's unbelievable. It's an unbelievable product. We were lucky enough to have the founder, Philip Meese, on the show a few months ago, and he was able to send us a bunch of product when we started the relationship and absolutely loved it. It's minimum ingredient product, beef, tallow, salt, and then they do have a honey flavored option as well, but it's so nice to have a bar that's like 3 to 4 ingredients. And like when you're following a carnivore diet, it's really tough to find products that are in line with that specific diet,
Yeah, for me, it kind of hits like the holy trinity of what you're looking for when you're looking for food. So it's nutrient dense, it's convenient, and it tastes great. And as you said, most people who are trying to eat healthy, the convenience factor is kind of a tough part. So just being able to have something you can grab on the go, know that you're going to have that nutrition for the day, it's huge.
Yeah, and we were lucky enough, we got to actually see their factory too in Missouri, and they're just doing things the right way. I love how they offer an option for like carnivore purists where it's just beef, tallow, salt. And then they also have an animal-based option too. If you do want a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of variety, they have the honey in that option. And they're just people that are doing things the right way. They're very mission focused. They're carnivores themselves. And, we're always on the go. We're traveling. We've taken a bunch of flights together. To have a bar that has 30 grams of fat too, like that's huge from an energy density standpoint, right?
Yeah, he checks all the boxes, or the company checks all the boxes. And I just think the fact that they're sourcing from a regenerative farm as well, and Joyce Farms, just a win-win.
100%. So carnivore bar. So we got the affiliate link, and then it's code MAFIA for 10% off.
And then another one of our sponsors, one of our favorite farms, Holy Cow. What they're doing at Holy Cow is pretty remarkable. The relationships that they've built in the industry and how long they've been doing the grass-fed, grass-finished regenerative model is really innovative. They were one of the first people to be doing that and supplying whole foods early on. Just a great community farm, and also just the product is something that speaks for itself.
Yeah, I think number one, to your point, Harry, they're just incredible people. We got to hear them speak at the Beef Initiative conference in Colorado. We had never met them before, but just hearing Warren's story where they were following a standard American diet, he had had a heart attack, and they were just looking for answers of like, how can we actually get healthier? Do I need to be dependent on medication? And they started changing their diets to incorporating more animal foods, and he completely reversed those symptoms of his stroke. And now they're just doing things the right way. They're grass finishing their beef. They're incorporating incredible practices. They have great relationships with the animals, and they're very passionate about just like connecting directly with the customer and also educating their customer on grass finished beef.
Yeah, and I think the best part is too, they're shipping nationally and trying to reach a bigger audience. So being able to not only supply beef nationally, but also educate people on the quality of good, clean, whole foods is just, it's an incredible mission.
How much do you love their beef bacon, by the way? I know that's your go-to.
Dude, it's one of the best things I've ever tasted.
It's that good.
No, honest to God, it's so good.
Holy cow.
Yeah. One of the other farms that supports us is Perennial Pastures, another regenerative farm out of San Diego. Our experience with Kevin Munoz, the owner, we had him on the show, a young first-generation rancher who's really empowered by this movement of regenerative agriculture and really wants to be a leader in the space. I think our conversation with him was so insightful, just in terms of how mission focused he is and how he really thinks about his farm as a business and wanting it to be here 50, 100 years down the road, even though he's just the first generation of it. And I think just being able to spend time with him out in San Diego was kind of the perfect indication of that, where we got to go have a meal with him at his house, hang out with his wife and kids. Like, what an amazing person. And I think his mission focus around raising really high quality beef and restoring nutrients to the soil is just one of those rare missions that I think everyone can get around.
Yeah, he has such a commitment to really feeding the local community in San Diego, in the San Diego County, first and foremost, but he's also passionate about feeding the community around the country. So I know they've invested a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of resources to being able to order beef in bulk on their website. So I know that they now offer quarter, half, whole cows directly off the website. They have that great ancestral blend ground beef product. So it actually has organ grinds mixed into the ground beef. So you're getting the benefits of like an ounce or so of organ meat, but because it's in the ground beef, you really can't taste it at all. And I think to your point, Harry, just another amazing person. Kev was someone that he was following a paleo diet in college and started realizing, wow, when I nourish my body with real foods, I feel amazing. Had a really successful stint in tech, but realized that there was just something else that he was passionate about. So he's one of those rare cases where, he put his money where his mouth is, and he's a first generation farmer, just, bootstrapping this thing, raising money, and just so passionate about feeding the community. Just an amazing guy.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your thoughts on organ supplements, and what do you think about the company that supports our podcast, Optimal Carnivore?
Such a good question, man. I think organ meat is something that's gained a ton of notoriety the last few years, and for good reason. I don't want to speak for you, but I think both of us have had a ton of benefits just incorporating organ meats into our diet. I would say that, we definitely prefer the raw source of organs where we'll just, chop up some liver and some heart. And, there are different ways to prepare it. I think the raw source is the most nutrient dense, but, we're fortunate that there are companies like Optimal Carnivore that exist that freeze dry organ capsules so you can actually take them on the go. There are a ton of times where we're traveling where we're not going to have access to raw organs. So I can throw a little Ziploc bag together of Optimal Carnivore and be good to go. And I think 6 pills is an ounce of organs, which is like the daily recommended amount that will give you a lot of those really good quality vitamins in there. So that's kind of how I think we've been using it. Did I miss anything there?
No, I think the fact that it just makes organs accessible to people. And I think that organs are generally just a food group that are underutilized when it comes to eating nose to tail. And the nature's vitamin is a perfect name for these organ foods. And I think a lot of people are pretty, in the mainstream object to eating organ meats. But when you put it in a pill form doesn't taste bad, it's convenient, you can put it in your backpack, it makes things a lot easier. And I also think that just generally these brands Optimal Carnivore is focused on making people healthier, which is just such a strong mission. And, I think liver capsules is a great way to get people thinking about their health differently.
100%. There's probably someone that's listening to this right now and you're interested in organ meats, but the taste might make you a bit squeamish. You feel strange about eating raw foods. Maybe you cook liver and you don't like it. Maybe it has a metallic taste. I think that's also where the organ capsules play such a great role, is that you're still getting that nutrient density, but you're getting it in a very convenient capsule-like format, and it just takes away any of that squeamishness that you might have to the taste. It's just a great product. And also Richard, who runs Optimal Carnivore, he's started listening to the show really early on, and he's built his own organ supply chain and is just doing things the right way and really trying to support the right people in the space. So just proud to be associated with them, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for listening. Now we're going to go back to the show. What do you say to people? Because there's obviously an economic reality to food. And I think it's very divergent right now because the cheap food is very convenient as well. So people who are stretched for time, working longer hours, it's almost like a tough opportunity cost to say, hey, cook your meals. And by the way, you're going to pay a little bit more for it. What do you say to people like when that question is brought up? Because it really is kind of the sad reality of the situation.
Well, from a nutritional standpoint, basically all processing destroys nutrition. I mean, let's just say it. You can take one of the most interesting science experiments that a guy in my high school did when I was in high school. We're talking about 50 years ago. This guy, he took a box of Wheaties, and he had 2 sets of rats, and he fed one Wheaties, and he fed the other one the ingredients that were in Wheaties that were listed on the box, the ingredients. The rats fed the ingredients, thrived, and the ones eating the Wheaties got sick. And they were not healthy, skinny, and and so I've never forgotten that. I mean, it was just such a revelatory experiment. I ran into 2 ladies out in California. They were doing a farm to school program. They had a little 3-acre farm, and the school district had incorporated this farm into the biology and science program. And so I think one day a week, the kids rotated through this farm. And they had a big earthworm bed that looked about the size of a coffin. It was about 6 feet long and 2 feet wide and a couple feet deep, and had a lid on a big box raising these worms. And to make a point, the 2 teachers said, all right, your assignment is Monday when you come, I want you to bring food. And so Monday the kids came, and of course they brought, Twizzlers and Hot Pockets and, I don't know what, artificials, but anyway, it was a bunch of, Snickers bar or whatever, okay? Things that kids eat. And the teachers, the 2 ladies, they put in an apple, an orange, a pound of ground beef. And, okay, they put it in a worm bed. A week later, of course, the kids were all primed for this. They go charging up the hill, open up the box. They pull out, the Twizzlers, the Snickers bar, the Hot Pockets, pull out all their stuff. It's not touched. Over here on the other end, where apple, orange, ground beef had gone in, it was all gone. The obvious question was, well, why would you want to eat something worms won't even eat? But it makes this wonderful point that essentially processing across the board, food will never be as nutritious as it is in its raw state, ever. Okay, and so you're never going to get the same nutrition out of something that's processed. So if you're interested in nutrition, a little bit extra time, maybe a little bit extra money will probably help. Now, we also know that even within the raw material, there's a huge difference in quality. For example, several years ago, we participated with 11 other farmers around the country in a nutrition egg study. They studied about 12 nutrients in eggs. And the official USDA nutrition label on a carton of eggs says 48 micrograms per egg of folic acid. I'll just pick one, folic acid. 48 micrograms per egg. Our eggs averaged 1,038.
Wow.
1,038 micrograms of folic acid per egg. We're not talking about 10% differences here. Grass-finished beef, 300% more riboflavin than grain-finished beef. Conjugated linoleic acid. It only takes 14 days of grain feeding to chase it out of the body of a herbivore, whether dairy or beef. The point is that the nutritional aspects vary greatly among depending on provenance. So if you if you really want food, if you want nutrition, often, though you're paying more per pound, you're actually getting way more nutrition because the pounds are more dense. And that makes a big difference. I mean, we've done food fairs where we take cook hamburgers and measure the amount of grease cook-off from the hamburger, and stuff from the industry, the conventional from the supermarket, cooks off like 30%. Ours cooks off 5%. So, one, you're losing 25% of your nutrition. The other one, you're losing 5%. So, can you afford to spend more on the other? If you're really buying nutrition, it comes that way. So, I just want to really make the point that that this is not the same food. It is not the same food. That's critical. An apple is not an apple is not an apple. The Bionutrient Association is now making this cool little handheld spectrophotometer. That's what Abby on NCIS has, in her lab, where she puts a speck of paint and it gives you all the chemical analysis of a speck of paint. And so they're doing this with vegetables, and they've now found, for example, that the most nutrient-dense carrot that they could find, you would have to eat 10 times as many carrots of the poorest ones to get the same nutrition as the best ones. Wow. And those are huge nutritional differences. And so let's talk about time. So I hope I've convinced people that paying attention to provenance is your first responsibility to your microbiome. That's your first responsibility. If I'm going to take care of this, I better think about provenance.
Yeah.
Now, time. So here again, there are all sorts of techniques. We talked about the crock pot. There's nothing like a crock pot. It's the ultimate no-time meal. You throw it in, you go to work, you come home, it's done. It's never burned. It's never dry. It's never overcooked. It's just there ready to go. So that's a great one. But there are lots of other techniques. For example, I'll give you some that we do here. We have stewing hens. These are egg layers that finish their productive egg life. What do you do with them? So we butcher them, and they're small. We can put about 8, 9 of them in a great big roaster pan. The kind that you'd put a turkey in for Thanksgiving, and you can pack all those chickens in there, cook them, 350 for 4 hours, pick the meat off, whack it up in little chunks, put it in quart freezer containers, put it in the freezer, and now you have pre-cooked frozen chicken. You get home from work at 5, supper's at 6, defrost, you set it out in the sink in the morning before you go, and it's defrosted when you get home from work. You got chicken a la king casserole. Everybody thinks you're the best gourmet in the world. That took, a couple minutes because you already had cooked stuff ready to go. We freeze chicken broth. You can, another is that you can cook extra. So you have leftovers. I'm convinced that the benchmark that indicates that somebody gets what we're talking about here is leftovers. Because if you're eating leftovers, that means you didn't get single service, you didn't get all that packaging, you probably cooked it from scratch, you probably ate around the table, and you took you had your leftovers. So, we live on leftovers. We love to overcook. We're back to the crock pot. Fill it up.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're gonna put one pork backbone in it, put in 4 or 5. Now you've got meals for you can put some in some ravioli. You can mix and match and all those kinds of things. So the time thing, all I would say, it a little bit it's like the money. It's like the money thing. When somebody says, "Oh, I can't afford this," well, then I hope that you're not buying 60-inch flat screen TVs, liquor, lottery tickets, Caribbean vacations, ski trips to Aspen, fashion clothes.
Yeah.
Okay. We kind of pick what we're and no takeout. Takeout is expensive.
Oh my gosh.
Really expensive. And it's the same thing with time. So you don't have time. Well, so how much time do you spend watching movies every week? The average American male right now, this is one I just read recently, the average American male now between 25 and 35 spends 20 hours a week playing video games.
Jeez.
That's average.
They can get paid for that.
No, they don't get paid for that.
That's insane.
Yeah. So when you talk about time, this is average. Okay. How much cooking do you think you could do? How much intentional participation in the food system do you think you could have at 20 hours a week? That's a lot. That's like 3 hours a day.
Yeah. Maybe that's a good segue to the next topic of your next book, where it's like, if someone's looking to make a transition away from this modern lifestyle and put that time towards something, it sounds like you're writing a new book on homesteading.
I am. Yeah. I'm working on a new book. The working title is Homestead Tsunami. And the subtitle is Good for the Family and the Culture. And this will be a book about why, because whether you know it or not, we are in a homestead tsunami right now. In this last year, we had a steady, I've never seen it like this before, a steady stream of these rental RVs, see America, across America, whatever.
Yeah.
People from New York, Michigan, California, looking to relocate, getting out of the city. There's this kind of intuitive understanding that if things go down, if things fall apart, if the wheels fall off, I don't want to be in the city. There's this just deep understanding, and so I'm seeing just literally thousands of people are relocating. Many of them small acreages, 2, 3, 4, 5. I say anything under 20 is a small acreage.
Yeah.
And they're not doing it to start a business, to start a farm business. they're doing it they're doing it to try, in at least this most basic area of life, to disentangle from their enslavement to the system. And as I said, we've been told for a couple of decades that true freedom comes from not participating in the mundane things of life. And here suddenly we realize, oh, true freedom is having your garden, having some chickens, a milk cow, a sourdough starter, mung beans sprouting on the windowsill, an herb garden. That is true independence.
Joel, is the main difference between a homestead and a farm just the commercial aspect of it? Okay.
Yeah. Many, in fact, I would say most farmers are not homesteaders. They're doing it as a business. I have the unique perspective that growing up here, we were basically a homestead. Now, Dad wanted to make a living on the farm, but quickly gave that up. We came here in 1961, and the farm was a gullied, worn out rock pile. He had a mortgage to pay, a young family. So Mom went to work off farm as a school teacher. Dad had his accounting. He went to work for a firm, and he was not a CPA, but he did bookkeeping, accounting work, tax preparation work. And those off-farm salaries paid the mortgage.
Got it.
So, within 10 years, the farm was paid for, okay? But by that time, Dad and Mom are now getting older. We kids are they're getting older, so their energy is waning. We kids are getting older, our energy is coming up, but there's no, I was going to say, a going concern. But, we milk cows, we had garden, we, we even did home butchery. I had my egg business starting at 10 years old, started with eggs, chickens. And so, it was never a going concern. But we had all those benefits. We had wood stove, so we had our energy. When I was in college, every summer I was home. June was haymaking. July was a big project, and then August was getting firewood cut so Mom and Dad would not freeze during the winter while I was gone. And that's just the way those summers went. And so we were very much, not off grid, but we were certainly pretty independent. I always said if we could figure out how to grow Kleenex and toilet paper, we could pretty much pull the plug on society.
That was one of the things I was going to ask you, was in the 60s and 70s, was your family even really going to the grocery store or the supermarket, or no, just because you're growing so much incredible food out here?
Yeah. We toilet paper and Kleenex. Yeah. And staples like sugar or flour. We never grew grains. So, flour. But we canned a lot. Corn came from the garden. We'd all get around and cut corn and freeze it. We just ate from, we made our own butter, churned butter, made yogurt, cottage cheese. We went to neighbors and picked apples and then made, applesauce. And we'd put bushels of apples in the well pit, the water well pit. It was kind of like a root cellar, and we could eat those, through the winter. We had potatoes and stuff in the root cellar for the winter. Butternut squash. Those things keep a long time, if it doesn't get too cold. And we dig, 500, 600, 700 pounds of potatoes and cover them up with straw in the barn. And Mom needed potatoes. I'd go out with a 5-gallon bucket, pull the straw back, and fill the bucket, bring the potatoes in. That's just how we ate, And I thought it was normal, and then found out that it wasn't real normal.
Do you think that this sort of return to personal responsibility and personal autonomy over food and honestly expand that to everything, really just kind of understanding, defending yourself and how to protect yourself and take care of yourself. Do you think that's inevitable based on the trajectory of where things are going?
Well, I think so. I think there is a definite feeling in our culture of concern. Certainly, the COVID black swan brought it, in right in front of people's faces. I mean, I've never seen empty store shelves like I saw in 2020.
It's unbelievable.
We sold here. We sold 6 months worth of stuff in 6 weeks. It was like a flood. People came out here, regular people who said, "Oh, I knew about you guys, but I'll never pay that for, that kind of, I'll never do that kind of food. We're going to go to Kroger's, and here we are because Kroger's doesn't have anything." And so, the fragility, the other aspect of this is, for decades, the whole mantra has been efficiency. And to get efficient, you have to scale up to be efficient, right? That's what we've been told. Efficiency. Well, what happened in COVID and now in the Ukraine, we're starting to realize first you have to be resilient. Because if you're not resilient first, there's nothing to be efficient about. So first you have to survive before you can ever thrive. And so, sure, I want to be as efficient as anybody, but the first goal is resilience. And what we found out was that scale, what I call a food aircraft carrier, whether it's a Tyson processing plant, a Campbell's soup manufacturing facility, but a food aircraft carrier is not what you want to be in when you have rocky shoals to navigate, and you have dysfunction and disturbance in the system. You want to be a speedboat. And the question I ask everybody, I say, let me ask you this. If in the spring of 2020, if instead of our country being supplied by 300 5,000 employee mega processing facilities, if that was the funnel, if instead of that funnel where all the food came through these mega facilities, if instead the food was supplied by 300,000 50 employee neighborhood community-based systems, would we have seen the crisis? Would we have felt the fear? Would we have had that we had in 2020? And the obvious answer is, of course not.
Yeah.
We would have had a much more diversified, democratic, decentralized system. And so, so you just take that to its ultimate, and you come to the homestead.
Yeah.
The homestead where, okay, not everybody can do this, but as for my household, we're gonna actually have that level of independence and security.
Did you feel like for you, COVID almost served as a successful stress test, like as this proof of concept of everything you're talking about, sovereignty, resiliency, autonomy that you've been speaking about for years? Yeah. I'm sure you felt very sorry for a lot of the other farmers, but I'm sure at the same time, it was like proof of work of everything that what you all are doing at Polyface, right?
Absolutely. I felt like Cinderella, living in the ashes all her life and suddenly get invited to the ball.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because especially then to add the insult to injury this spring with the Ukraine situation, we don't buy fertilizer.
Yeah.
We don't buy wheat from Ukraine. We buy grain from local farmers right here that we know, that we can go visit and see. And so when you shorten those chains of custody, you greatly reduce the vulnerabilities in that chain of custody. And that, of course, reduces fragility and makes things more secure and more stable. And so, yes, my big epiphany was right here in the store. One day I'm in here and a customer comes in and she's looking at the meat count, the beef in there, and she kind of, catches her breath. I say, "You okay? You need some help?" She said, "No, I just came from Costco. Sirloin steak is $16.99 a pound. Yours is $9.99 a pound." And then I go to do some research. I find out, well, Tyson in 12 months raised their beef prices 32%. Why? Because when you've got 5,000 employees crammed in cool, dark, damp conditions with a bunch of blood and guts all around, that is a very vulnerable place when you have an active virus going on.
Totally.
Okay? But in a small neighborhood plant where people are very spread out in their workstations, just because that's the way it is, and you're not on top of each other, and there's only 20 of you and not 5,000. It's a totally different thing. And so what I realized is that these big companies were literally being unable to sleep at night for, oh no, did I quarantine the right sector there because Dave over there got COVID? Oh no, is somebody going to put in a lawsuit because we didn't have the right plexiglass divider in place in time before they came into work yesterday? I mean, this was the stuff that was going on. I mean, these new protocols took millions of hours of time in these big outfits. I realized, here at the farm, we've got 20 people here. I never gave it another thought. I didn't think anybody was going to sue us or question us for quarantine. We just went on about our business like normal, and it just was a non-issue. And the lights went off in my head, and I realized, wow, what we've been told for decades is the secret to success, efficiency, and economy can go too far over an edge. I mean, when Joel Arthur Barker wrote the book Paradigms and introduced the term paradigms to the world back in the 80s, one of his axioms was every paradigm eventually exceeds its point of efficiency. That's a fascinating concept. And so, when we brought chickens inside and we centralized chicken processing, it was okay for a while, but there's a big difference between 15,000 chickens in a house and 2,000 chickens in a house. Big difference. And so those things, so what happens is that as that paradigm eventually exceeded its point of efficiency, then what we were doing became affirmed on a very broad scale. Affirmed. I mean, so and that's one reason I'm on so many podcasts now. People are, how are you responding? You're not whining about fertilizer prices? No, I don't care. I don't buy any of the stuff, And so, we feel affirmed and vindicated on a really deep, broad scale now, like we've never been. I've never been more excited about our farming future here because I now know our resiliency is way up there.
That's amazing to hear. Do you feel like you're able to charge enough of a premium for that resiliency, like a resiliency premium to your day-to-day customers? Because the two scenarios that you just described, one is a panic where people are coming and buying 6 weeks worth of food in 6 months. The capitalist in you is probably thinking, well, maybe I can charge some more food for my well-raised, resilient food now.
Yep.
But then your role as kind of a food provider is really it's such a tough position to be in.
It is. That's one of the biggest tensions in business that there is. We've been at it several times now with these big high-path avian influenza outbreaks in the egg industry, where they've destroyed 10 million chickens, and suddenly the eggs are short and eggs spike. And we've actually been through this cycle more than once. And each time, suddenly eggs are short and we're lower priced than in the store, for like 2 or 3 months. And the temptation is always to ride that wave. And we have never done it. We've looked in the mirror and said, no, we're going to hold the course. We're in it for the long haul. We want our customers to know that we're not jumping on a bandwagon just because there's some glitch in the system. And that, I think that has built a lot of loyalty and appreciation that we're not going to capitalize on somebody else's mistakes. Now, does that mean we don't go up? No. So, like I said, Tyson went up 32%. We've gone up about 12%. Okay. So we are very much now. I can tell you right now, when we go price stuff, we are in many things cheaper, especially places like Whole Foods. We're cheaper than a lot of the things there, and so we've never wanted to get rich. What we want to do is make enough profit that we're not paupers, but enough is enough. I have no desire to drive a Ferrari. I have no desire to go on a Caribbean cruise, and so we just try to make enough that we can be happy and satisfied with where we are, and pass that on to our customers.
Yeah, that passion and that love to educate definitely comes through, and we can feel that. And it's funny that you mentioned Whole Foods, because I have a very vivid memory of being in New York in 2019, and I swear the price of ribeyes were like $15, $16. And I remember thinking that was expensive then. And now when I go to that same Whole Foods, it's like $25 to $28.
Right.
So that perfectly reinforces everything that you're saying about these big packers just raising prices.
Yeah, yeah. So what I'm getting at is that the scale, what we've learned now, is that the scale actually bakes in a certain degree of fragility.
Definitely.
That we don't have here. And so, yeah, so we're very excited about this, these models, these pasture-based models, the carbon economy, driving our agronomy, our fertility being driven by, compost and carbon, for all those things that they have been, like I say, like we've been in the ashes, and now we get invited to the ball. It's pretty cool.
Do you think about how, because I think where we are right now in terms of scale in food is largely driven by what's happened with the incentives, and subsidies that have been put in place. Do you think about how, the government should be thinking about promoting what you're doing, or do you think they should even be having a seat at the table?
If I was king for a day, there wouldn't even be a USDA. I know that's an incredibly, some people would say a reckless statement, but at the end of the day, the USDA, I call it the USDA, has not done anything positive. They've not done anything positive for nutrition. Now they've done positive things for a select group of people, that's for sure. But no government agency has been more successful at eliminating its constituency as the USDA. And I know, when you look at their objectives, number one is cheap food. Well, if you have cheap food, you're going to have cheaply paid farmers. If you have cheaply paid farmers, you're going to have nobody attracted to farming except the C and D students. If we're going to attract A and B students to be the front line, we talk about frontline workers, frontline health workers, frontline firefighters, if we're going to, farmers are our frontline resource managers.
Definitely.
And if we're going to have our best and brightest on the front lines of our resource management, we have to have not only a mental, philosophical mystique that they're valuable, but we have to have an economic reality that says they're valuable. I mean, I ask people, that go to farmers market, what would you think if your farmer showed up at his booth next week driving a Mercedes-Benz? Would that bother you? Most people, it would. Well, what's it, well, you're driving a Mercedes-Benz. Why should your farmer be poorer paid? And I don't want to get into all about fairness and all this stuff, but I'm trying to help people to understand that if farmers are our frontline defense stewards of our resources, air, soil, water, which are way more important than Wall Street and 401k plans and Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Okay, if that's where it's going to be, we have to as a culture change not only our mental but our practical mindset as to who these people are. And so, yeah, I think that the cheap, so the U.S. has number one is a cheap food policy. I mean, we don't have a cheap car policy. We don't have a cheap celebrity policy. We don't have a cheap NFL player policy. We don't have you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But we have a cheap food policy, and that mentality, it goes down within the system. And then the other one is that farmers are supposed to feel compelled to feed the world. American farmers are supposed to feed the world. Well, I've been all over the world. I was just in South Africa for 2 weeks.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. And I got news for you. Nobody in the world needs American food. Nobody. Nobody starves because there's not enough food. They starve because some, warlord won't let a truck cross without a extorted bribe. An avalanche, destroyed an access road. The local leaders put all the economy on the black market or whatever. But nobody in the world is starving because there's not enough food. Right now, 40% of all human edible food on the planet is thrown away. We've never had that much waste before, ever. So this burden that the American farmer carries on his back, and it's real. I've just got to feed the world. I've just got to feed the world, and it's a mental and emotional drain. And so, what we need is to allow other countries to feed themselves. I mean, again, I've been to Africa, and they will tell you the reason we don't have a functional local agriculture system is because of cheap foreign imports or U.S. aid coming in, and the entrepreneurs. Every tribe, every culture has entrepreneurs, and what happens is the entrepreneurs who would be running local food and processing systems, and the food system, they get displaced by handouts from the West. And guess what happens to displaced entrepreneurs? They find out another business to be entrepreneur in, which is usually shaking down, trucks and forming little warlord gangs. And those are the entrepreneurs. Those guys that are walking around with their little cadre of, AR-15 toting dudes. Those are the entrepreneurs in the culture. And so. Yeah, I take a pretty dim view of this whole idea that the world will starve if American farmers don't meet their quota. I mean, out west we are irrigating. We are desertifying the West, depleting the aquifers to grow alfalfa to ship to Japan to feed racehorses.
It's insane.
Our priorities are so out of whack.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane. I mean, America right now has 35 million acres of lawn and 36 million acres of ground feeding and housing recreational horses. Now, I'm not opposed to horses. I don't think they're evil or anything, but that's 71 million acres. That's enough to feed the entire country without a single farm. We're not running out. The tragedy of the human experience is not that we're loafing. It's that we're busy about the wrong things.
Right.
Busy about the wrong things. That's actually interesting. I had no idea that food waste was 40%. Did you know that it was that high?
No, that's insane. I mean, such a lack of just, I mean, it's so inefficient. You think about all the people who could be benefiting from higher quality food, more nutritious food if that was reallocated.
Right. But I mean, look at the dumpster behind the supermarket. I mean, if there's a blemish, if it's too long, too short, too crooked, whatever, and a lot of this waste is due to long supply chains. So if you eat seasonally, I mean, here, for example, we don't eat strawberries. We don't eat strawberries except in May and June. That's when we have strawberries. So, man, we eat strawberries like they're going out of style, May and June. Well, then what happens? Well, then come the raspberries in July. And then the blackberries come in late July. And then the apples, by that time, the apples start coming in. The mulberries are coming in from about, mid-June to mid-August. When you start eating seasonally, it's not like you're depriving yourself. You're actually immersing consciously in the abundance and satiation of our ecological womb. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put that. I was thinking before when you were talking about what's happened kind of in terms of globalized food and this perspective that Americans took to weaponize food and almost use it as a geopolitical tool. Yep. It almost being this massive oversight in terms of just like creating and continuing the culture of health, wealth, and abundance in America, and just kind of like letting that go to the wayside. And then you start weaponizing food and using it as a tool to gain favor in other countries. It's really just, if you look back, it's done a number on our health. Like we're living through it.
Using food as a tool of violence is simply an expression of treating food from a perspective of violence. So when you are assaulting the earthworms with glyphosate, and you're assaulting the chickens with a 15,000 bird confinement factory, and you're assaulting the dairy cows with a little concrete paddock and eating, eating what's equivalent to candy bars all day, and only have 2 pregnancies in their lifetime. They're supposed to have 10. I could go on, but you get the idea that as we fail to ask, how do we make happy pigs? How do we make happy tomatoes? When we fail to ask those questions and we view them as just inanimate piles of protoplasmic structure to be manipulated however cleverly hubris can imagine to manipulate them, we are inherently disrespecting and doing violence to the beautiful synergistic, symbiotic, relational complexity that this whole soil and plant and animal web spins for itself. And so the natural extension of that is then to take what we've done domestically and we extend that same perspective disrespectfully to other cultures, other belief systems, other things throughout the world. And we weaponize food like we've, weaponized our production mentality. And
it's amazing how
those are kind of profound ideas, but they're no less real.
I tell you, those are some interesting hoops to jump through because it's just this principle that just gets reapplied throughout the entire life cycle of food.
Yeah. So, when people ask me, well, what do you do for a living? I've actually just responded sometimes, make happy copulating earthworms. It really does come down to that. We don't think about that anymore. We don't think about those terms. Imagine you go to a bank and you're starting a business, and you're going to the bank for this investment loan, And the banker looks at your business plan and says, that's a pretty good business here. In fact, I think you're going to be a millionaire, and I'd like to. We'll do the boss hog thing, I'd like to be your partner. We're gonna make $1 million here. But I have one question before I load you this money for this business. What's it going to do to the earthworms in our community? Nobody asked that question, and yet we all know intuitively that question is more profound than whether the Dow Jones Industrials went up or down today. But in the morning when we're taking our shower, we're not thinking about the bumblebees, the pollinators, the earthworms. We just don't think about it. We're thinking about the Kardashians, the NFL playoffs. I just found out that in just the month of October, Virginians spent $528 million betting on sports games.
It's incredible.
Mainly football.
Yeah.
What would $528 million in a month in one state do? Here we are again, the cost of good food.
Right.
That would be, I don't know how many Virginians we have, do we have even if we have, 10 million people living here, that's enough for everybody to have plenty of food. And I'm not saying that it's sinful to do that. I'm just trying to point out some of the more glaring value displacements in our culture, and just say, if the shoe fits, wear it. And trust me, I have my hypocrisies too. But let's see if we can try to reduce some of those. Yeah. You can't eliminate all of them. You're going to have inconsistencies. That's fine. But let's try to pick at least some of the low-hanging fruit here.
Yeah.
And reduce some of those big glaring societal hypocrisies.
This is purely anecdotal, but you're reminding me, I grew up in suburban New Jersey in the 90s, and I swear I felt like everyone had a garden back when we were growing up. I don't know if it was similar to you in DC, but sure. I felt like almost everyone in my neighborhood did. And now when I go walk that same neighborhood, I don't think anyone has a garden. So I'm just wondering, from your perspective, to bring it back to the homesteading, are there things that you think that everyone should be doing when it comes to their food that can maybe help with some of these problems that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think that almost everyone can do something visceral with the majesty of life. Now, that might be nothing more than a quart jar of sprouted mung beans on the windowsill. It might be nothing more than you can buy now little kits, vermicomposting kits, stick it under your sink, and you put your kitchen scraps in there, and the earthworms churn up and turn into castings that then you can put in your flowers or garden plants or whatever. But I think when we live such an antiseptic life, that we never encounter the mystery and majesty of viscerally watching life, creation, death, the rejuvenation that comes with decomposition, those kinds of things, really interacting with that. I think that we lose humility, a humble outlook. We tend to think, when we're divorced from that, we tend to think that we're in charge. Mm-hmm. I got this, and video games have not helped this.
Totally.
I'm driving my car and it wrecks in a tree, and in 5 seconds the game gives me a new car. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not life. That's not real. That's insane. That's complete insane fantasy. And so what happens is, as we put more and more attention and time on this, we start coming to basic things of life as being at the whim of my fingertips. Mm-hmm. And so, when you grow one tomato in your little patch, and that tomato dies, life doesn't give you a new tomato. You've got to wait a season. Well, maybe better next year, And what you start finding out is, I'm ultimately not in charge. There's something bigger going on. And I don't want to get, too spiritual here, but I think it's very helpful. It gives us a better balanced view of life to come realizing that I just don't have every tiger by the tail.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's weather, there's things going on, there's fungi and mycelium and actinomycetes. There's stuff going on that's not just in my control.
Which is such an amazing point, because we're really the only species that pretends like we're disconnected and removed from nature, or better than nature,
Right.
yet we're also the most unhealthy species. We can't do these basic functions that no other animal struggles with.
That's right. We can overrun our own headlights. We can innovate things that we can't spiritually, emotionally, or physically metabolize. That's how creative we are.
It's insane to me, because it feels like the reality that we're living in is such a derivative of the reality of nature. And every conversation that we have with farmers, you guys see the life cycle every day. Mm-hmm. So it's almost, we live in a, it's a reality that's a further derivative away from what you experience. But just coming in contact with people who really are seeing these things day to day, and your experience and understanding what life actually is,
right?
It kind of brings us back down to like, hey, there's more going on here.
There is, and the tendency in our very Western reductionist mindset, linear thinking, is a very mechanistic view of almost everything.
Right.
You don't feel good, take this drug. Mm-hmm. We view life as kind of interchangeable parts. I mean, look what we've done with DNA. Look what we've as if everything is some sort of a bearing in a car. That goes thump thump when you stop the car. You pull the wheel off, put a new bearing in, boom, you're up and running. Biology is not like that. You don't just go out and change out the fusarium wilt on a cucumber for a non-fusarium wilt plant. It doesn't work that way. And so I think exactly that's what you're describing there is just an understanding that there are things going on that I can't see, some that I can't even know actually, and don't know. I mean, think about this. Right now, we know that there are about 7 to 8 billion with a B microorganisms in a handful of healthy soil. All right. We have only named 10% of them. 90% are unnamed and unknown. And yet we come out here with chemical fertilizers, glyphosate, herbicide, pesticides, dumping this stuff on. We don't have a clue. I mean, it's like a conquistador mentality. We walk around like a bunch of swashbuckling, pirates, exploiting this amazing web of interconnectedness, and we don't know what the ramifications of this and this are, and yet we do it with, I can grow this, I can do this, I can do that. And things like COVID, things like Vladimir Putin, things like this, I think are really good to bring us up short and realize, maybe there are constraints that are beyond human manipulation.
And you have such an interesting perspective when it comes to soil, because didn't you increase the organic matter from 1% to 8%
That's
from
right.
the time your parents bought the property and to the time now in 2022?
Yeah. We early soil samples was 1%. Today it's over 8%. And when you consider that every percentage increase in organic matter holds 20,000 gallons of water per acre. So 7 clicks would be 7 times 20, 140,000 gallons of water per acre. Because organic matter is like a sponge. It's, it's soft and it's like permeable. And so right now we can hold 140,000 gallons of water more per acre now than we did, half a century ago. And half a century ago, a lot of people would say, well, that's a long time. No, it's not. In geologic time, 50 years is a spit in the ocean. It's
Right.
nothing. It's nothing. And so that's the beauty of this, that as much damage as we've collectively as a human species, as much damage as we've created, it can be remedied extremely rapidly. That's the beauty of biology. Mechanics doesn't heal. If that wheel bearing goes out, you can go down there, you can say, oh, I'm sorry, you need to see some rest. Okay, you need some rest. Here, I'll pour on some oil. I'll pray over you. You can do all sorts of things. You get back in the car and that wheel bearing is going to thump, thump, thump.
Yeah.
But living things can forgive. A wound on your hand, it'll heal. A wounded relationship can heal with an apology. I mean, that's the magnificence of living things versus mechanical things.
So one of the things you mentioned was the soil matter, organic matter improving from 1 to 8%. And a lot of people in kind of these industrialized conventional food systems are seeing the exact opposite of that, where we're zapping it down. That's
right.
What does that world look like?
Well, what that world looks like is less hydration. So land dries out. As land dries out, it becomes more difficult to grow vegetation. When vegetation doesn't grow as much, you have less vegetation, so you have fewer biological exudates. In order for vapor to condense, it needs a particle to condense on. And so, Dr. Walter Yenny from Australia is the world leading guru of this. He says the whole climate change discussion is missing the point. It's not about greenhouse gas emissions. It's about condensation in the atmosphere. That's the radiator of the planet. And the problem is we have so devegetated the planet with overgrazing, overtillage, overburning, overforestry, depletion, all these things, that the amount of vegetation on the surface of the planet is now incredibly less than it was 2,000 years ago. And so what happens is, as the vegetation depletes, organic matter drops, water retention drops, flooding increases, drying increases, vegetation decreases. You don't have the exudates. Guess what? Now you don't have atmospheric condensation. You don't have cloud formation. Now rain patterns change. Now the planet is having trouble cooling itself. And so it goes to places that have plenty of vegetation, like over the tropics, or parks in India, and drops way more rain than normal. So you have extreme rain compensation in areas that are heavily vegetated, and you have extreme rain deprivation in places that are vegetatively lower. And that's why you have these anomalies. And so there's an old Chinese saying that says, if you keep going the way you're headed, if you keep going the way you're going, you're going to end up where you're headed. And so the fact that our industrial chemically fertilized soils are depleting both in volume and in organic matter, is the same thing that happened in Greece, in Rome, in India. I mean, you can just look at the ancient civilizations, Libya, the north of, Homer, who wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey. Remember, the Cyclops and the,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. He said he walked across the entire north of Africa and never left the shade of a tree. Libya supplied jaguars, lions, and apes to the Colosseum in Rome for circuses and stuff. Well, there's hardly an animal in Libya now. I mean, it's just a desert, okay? And so we can look through history, and I get the burden. I feel it. I feel incredibly convicted about what my ancestors have done. I get it. I'm sorry. But the answer is not to just to not just abandon the ecology, to say, well, let's not even try. No, the answer is, after you brush yourself off from repentance, take our mechanical ability, opposing thumbs, and our intellectual capacity. Let's roll up our sleeves and let's fix it. Mm-hmm. And I feel, just to run that one step further, I feel like the discovery of petroleum in the early 1900s and that golden age of cheap energy was almost like God saying to humanity, I'm going to give you one last chance. Cheap energy to fix everything you've destroyed. You can build ponds. You can do even better than the beavers. You can build swales. You can do permaculture. You can plant trees with backhoes. You can do all sorts of. You can remediate all this in a couple of generations. But instead of that, we built a food system that takes 15 calories of energy to put 1 calorie on your plate. Mm. We built a food system that averages 1,500 miles between field and fork. We built a food system that takes way more energy than it actually offers. And that's absolutely backwards. It ought to be running on solar energy through vegetation, carbon as a decomposer to feed the worms, to grow the soil, to grow the plants, to feed the people, to steward this actual abundance cycle and not a scarcity cycle.
Joel, do you think that large industrial farms are actually aware of what they're doing to the soil? And do you have hope that they can actually change their practices?
And that's such a great question. I don't think so. I think as a rule, Monsanto, look at their website, they're presenting themselves as the ultimate sustainable agriculture, the repository of sustainable agriculture. So no, I don't think so. Now, the people I meet though, on a daily basis, you meet this farmer, he's got, a ranch, and he's got this acreage, and he's growing it, and man, I've just noticed, it takes more money to get the same production. I'm losing, blah, 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 blah. And I got to make a change. So I see it on an individual basis like this. But in the main, no, I don't think. Here's the thing you got to realize. If what we did became normal, it would completely invert the power, position, prestige, and profits of the entire food and farming system. That's a big ship to turn around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you ever think about the role of, and we touched on this a little bit, but just the role of money in all of this? Because we obviously got off the gold standard at a certain point, and I think that when we break money, it has a way of breaking values down the value chain, and food, I think, is clearly one of those. Sure. Do you think about that at all?
Well, I do. I think about it in terms of this, that Wendell Berry writes a lot about this, that we as a culture have not figured out how to actually put an economic liability on things that are liabilities. For example, if I go out here, when you came into the farm here, you drove across the little creek out mm-hmm. here, if I dump a bunch of pollution in that creek and the EPA or Department of Environmental Quality has to come in here with a bunch of boom trucks and suck up, clean it up, all right? That actually goes on our gross domestic product record books as an asset. Mm. Because it made jobs, we burned fuel, we bought trucks, economic activity. If we got a bunch of juvenile delinquents in the community and have to build a new juvenile detention center for all these delinquents, concrete, air conditioners, steel, wood, GDP goes up. Wendell Berry says, it's as if what's wrong with us creates more GDP than what's right with us. And so the bottom line for me is that when a culture cannot figure out how to economically quantify its cultural liabilities, it will tend to put a blind eye to them. And goodness, if it views its liabilities as an asset, that's even worse. And so as a culture, we have not, as creative as we are, we have not figured out how to actually put an economic value on the fact that we have a Mississippi River chemically created dead zone the size of Rhode Island in the Gulf of Mexico. What's a dead zone the size of Rhode Island worth? All those shrimp farmers, all those fisheries, all those things gone. What's that worth? A society that can't quantify that will not quantify it, and therefore will not rectify it because they don't see a need.
Yeah, it's like the tragedy of the commons is directly related to our ability to, because I view a lot of it as this externality related to printing money out of thin air, which breaks the natural law of like economies, right?
Absolutely, we got to build more hospitals. Well, that should be a liability,
right? Not
an asset. Now, I'm not opposed to hospitals. I'm just suggesting that if we, why don't we figure out how to not have to use hospitals as much? The fact that the United States, look, I'm a red-blooded American like anybody else. I love our country, okay? I don't like a lot of things that I see in it anymore, but I do love our country. And there are things that you want to be first in. You wish the soccer team had won. You want to be first in, basketball. You want to bring home the most Olympic golds, right? But there are things we want to be first in. We are first in the world in chronic morbidity. Is it any wonder that we lead the world in chronic morbidity and our food culture? You go to anywhere in the world, I do this all the time. I ask people around the world, when you think of American food, what do you think? McDonald's.
Yeah.
Always. So we invented McDonald's and we lead the world in chronic. Now, have I done a scientific analysis? No. But I think it's important to realize we invented factory farming. We brought DDT to the world. We brought this mechanical mentality. I'm a lot older than you guys. When I was a kid, for the first 20 years of my life, you never heard phrases that we have today. Food allergy. It didn't exist.
No.
If mama wanted to have a birthday party for the 3-year-old and invite the friends, she'd have to spend a week on the phone with all the moms saying, okay, what can I, what's your kid allergic to? What can I, no, everybody brought their stuff and they ate. And, Campylobacter, Listeria, E. coli, Salmonella, I didn't know anybody that had type 2 diabetes. I didn't know anybody that was diabetic. We all knew one fat person. Teresa and I were talking about this the other day, She knew one fat man. I knew one fat lady growing up. Now, there's a ton of them, okay? I'm just pointing out that we as humans, we have pretty short memories, actually. We tend to think, I wrote my first book on a typewriter. Now our young people don't know what a typewriter is, never seen one,
Right.
Had one yelled down from the living room the other day, what are these big CDs? They were LP records, okay? And so we do tend to have short memories. And so what we have done is we've gotten to a place where a lot of people don't even remember where we were at one point. And so, when you say, are they going to change? I think I think that kind of change, when you talk about money and economy and stuff, as long as those profits are rolling in, I mean, who could have thought that Bayer, with their glyphosate legal litigation issues, could set aside $9 billion to pay off plaintiffs and not even take its product off the market? Have you ever heard of such a thing?
No.
It's crazy.
We really do have short memories. I saw this great picture on Twitter a couple weeks ago, and it was the fattest man in the country in 1850. He was like literally a circus act that would travel around. And he looked like he's probably somewhere between like 350, 400 pounds. And I'm like, if you go to Walmart, you'll see multiple people that are probably fatter than him now. And people don't realize that was a circus act back then versus now it's just completely normalized.
Yeah, I was on the board of the local fire department, and there are people that call 911 to get service because they can't walk out their door. They're so big. This is crazy. I don't want to get on all that, but you were asking, when are they going to see the light? And history indicates that things have to the wheels have to fall off. Now, I'm seeing wheels falling off in individual farmers and ranching operations. Their wheels fall off, and the epiphany happens, and I got to make a change. But overall, the industry as we know it, the food industry, the New Jersey street where they make the red dye 29 and they have all this stuff. That's not going to change. I think for a long time.
Especially when they've kind of drained the profits out of farming and made it so that there's not really an incentive to drive up higher food quality and do things the right way from a quality perspective.
No, in fact, right now, the farmer's share of the retail dollar across the board, now obviously different commodities are different amounts, but the average now, across the board, is 9% of the retail dollar.
Wow.
So we're getting ready to do a new farm bill, and we could say the new farm bill, from now on, farmers don't get a penny. They're not going to get paid a penny. And it would only change the price of food 9%. Is that not something?
It's insane.
Yeah.
I wonder what percentage of the dollar it was back in like the 50s or 60s.
In the 50s and 60s, it was almost 50%.
Almost 50.
Almost 50%.
And did you feel like
in the 40s and 50s? But boy, as soon as TV dinners, Velveeta cheese, all that convenience type stuff started coming in, it really plummeted. I mean, I'm sure you've heard there's more money in the cardboard of the box of Wheaties than there is in the corn in the box of Wheaties.
There's probably more nutrients in that cardboard box too, honestly.
Might be.
So we've had a really fun last few days. We've been on this road trip, and we had a chance to stop at White Oak Pastures and see Will Harris. And he was mentioning Gabe Brown. We were mentioning to him that we were coming up here, and it seems like there's this amazing group of regenerative farmers who have really pushed this message forward. But when you look back behind you guys in terms of the next generation, do you see what you would like to see in terms of kind of carrying the torch forward in terms of doing things the right way, raising high quality food and creating what you view as a positive future? Yes.
Every generation thinks, it's going to die with me, but it doesn't. And so, yes, there is a whole cadre of young people, innovative, entrepreneur, way more, computer savvy than us old guys, and I that's not going to be a problem. That's not going to be an issue. I think, in fact, in the next 15 years, 50% of all American agriculture equity is going to change hands because the average farmer is 60 years old. So half of all American agriculture equity, that's land, buildings, equipment, is all going to change hands in the next 15 years. Now, you can either say, oh, no, what are we going to do? or you can say, wow, what a time of unprecedented opportunity. This is as much opportunity as goodness was in front of the early pioneers, the Homestead Act and Laura Ingalls Wilder, and it's an unprecedented time of opportunity, and I'm just seeing thousands of young to middle-aged folks stepping out, and many of these homesteaders, they'll homestead for a couple of years, and some of the more savvy entrepreneurial ones, hey, maybe we'll sell some eggs, and what happens then is that nearby lands where farmers are aging out will become available to either buy or lease, and this thing that started as let's just feed our family, you don't know, 10 years down the road, suddenly it's a going concern. It's a real commercial business. So I think there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of interest right now. I mean, we run the apprentice program. We're still getting right on about 100 applicants a year for our 11 spots, and it's just consistent right along. All these young people are ready to they're ready to go do something. So I'm very optimistic about that.
It's amazing how optimistic you are about that 50% too. Isn't it incredible how much of it just comes down to perspective as well? Because I'm sure there's probably a crop of farmers that are like, oh my gosh, the average age of a farmer is 68. What's going to happen with this younger generation? Where you're like, no, these applicants that are coming in and working with us, they're all kick-ass. They've got piss and vinegar, and they want to enact change.
Exactly. They got energy. They got new ideas. And let me tell you, nothing is as frustrating as trying to present a new idea to a hermit curmudgeon old farmer. I mean, they're impossible. And so, my mentor, Alan Nation, when I would ask him about this, he'd say, well, we just have to wait till they die. I mean, I don't want to get morbid, but I mean, literally, we have to have a changing of the guard.
Yeah.
And as these guys age out, their lands, obviously some will be bought up by Bill Gates and company. All right, I get it. But a lot of it is going to be bought and or managed by a bunch of people who didn't grow up on farms under the tutelage that said we can't do it that way.
Right.
And so suddenly we've got all these young land stewards who don't have to de-learn and unlearn and fight with grandpa that can just go and do new stuff.
It's even been encouraging from a consumer's perspective for both of us too, not being farmers. We see it right with our friends and family. There's almost been this awakening this last 2 to 3 years, this unintentional and positive benefit of COVID of people that want to connect with their local rancher and they care about sourcing grass-finished beef and they're avoiding the inner aisle of the grocery store. So I feel like that gives us hope all day long, just seeing the response and behaviors of other concerned consumers.
Yeah, well, John Moody and I started the Rogue Food Conference. We just had our fifth conference in Tennessee. The next one's coming up here at Polyface in May 12 and 13. And this was the first time we sold out in a month in advance and had people trying to scalp tickets to get in.
Wow.
The desire for this, and the reason this is important is because what we're doing, again, both sides of the spectrum, we see increasing noose tightening, tyranny tightening from the government, food police, regulations, that sort of thing, economic regulations, who can you buy, who can you sell, even a digital currency. I mean, there's all sorts of worrisome stuff. As a society starts to wane, the government power, before it collapses, tends to become more authoritarian to try to circle the wagons, protect our power, right? Well, that has stimulated a backlash that's just burgeoning in rural America, especially among direct producer consumer, farm to consumer marketing, to create circumventive options. So we have personal membership associations. We have a food church in North Carolina. We've got herd share for milk. All these things, they're just increasingly developing on the landscape as people find ways to build a parallel universe. Don't even try to be inspected. Don't even try to comply with the license. Let's just build a parallel universe. And that's one of the most exciting things to me right now. There's a lot of effort, innovation, and energy going into a parallel universe. And I'm excited for it.
Do you think we can do that on a U.S. dollar system, or do we need to have some sort of workaround there?
Well, if they don't mess it up too much, I think so. It's a good question. When a money supply becomes completely irrelevant, then people resort to other things. And the beauty of the internet now is, let me tell you, when I was a teenager, this was Vietnam, and it was the beginning of the hippie movement, okay, the peace hippie movement. You guys are too young for that, but it was the beginning of the hippie movement. And one of the threads of that whole movement was what were called barter fairs. Barter fairs. So this was an anti-IRS thing. We're not going to pay taxes to fight in Vietnam. So this was one of the threads of the protest movement was cashless. We're going to just trade. And so there were these barter fairs. I bring 6 chickens, another guy brings a shirt, and and people just trade. Of course, the IRS hated it. But I'm thinking today, and they kind of flared out. It went and then it was done. But I'm thinking today, when you look at Craigslist, at the democratization of information, we have an unprecedented opportunity to create barter among extremely diverse sectors. For example, we go to an acupuncturist, we pay in meat. So we take, what do you want? And so we take some meat up, and that works. I think that with the internet now, democratizing the ability to communicate across wide spectrums with people that have much broader, wider expertise and skills, services and goods, I can actually imagine an almost a bartering kind of thing, developing. And I call this the Uberization of the food system. Who would have guessed 20 years ago that millions of people around the globe would jump into cars with people that didn't have a special decal on the window, with drivers that didn't have any special training, and say, take me to the Hilton. Nobody would have guessed that. What happened was the butcher, baker, and candlestick maker of the 1500s were vetted by the Village Voice. The butcher, baker, candlestick maker lived in a house above their shop. Everybody knew what came in the front door, what went in the back door. That they were embedded, so the good ones were successful and the bad ones were not. With the Industrial Revolution, we took the butcher, baker, candlestick maker and scaled them up and placed them behind razor wire with guardhouses, and people started getting scared. What's going on behind that wire? And people asked for the government to come in and oversee what they couldn't see behind the fence. That's the 40s, 50s, and 60s, 70s. Well, here comes the internet and the computer, Airbnb and Uber, which completely circumvented and brought the village butcher, baker, candlestick maker vetting from the feudal village was transformed into a global vetting with real-time monitoring, auditing through the internet. And so the internet has reconfigured the auditing of yesteryear on a global scale. And so when you talk about how do you make, I think that kind of cleverness will simply organically develop within the society with what we have now, the tools we have. There is just so much creativity going on. I'm not sure at this point if it's going to be crypto. I mean, crypto's kind of had some big hits here lately. And I'm concerned about digital currency just on its surface. Anything that can go in a computer can be hacked in a computer. I mean, that kind of thing. But I do think that there is enough creativity and practical innovation in these spaces that if it's not the U.S. dollar as we know it, people will still figure out how to transact win-win situations.
Yeah.
Right.
We've definitely seen tremendous demand for things like private membership associations and bartering systems. The question is there a way to be able to have those systems without the USDA? Because obviously, like the Amos Miller situation is something that comes to mind for me. So I'm just curious your perspective.
So Amos Miller right now is the front man for the PMA test. The problem with Amos Miller was he didn't have legal representation. He signed a cease and desist order that he never should have signed because he got very bad counsel. I mean, his court-appointed counsel was against him. All right. Well, for us peasants, the courtroom is an intimidating place. And if your own counsel thinks you're a jerk, that's really intimidating. Okay. Fortunately now, he's got some good counsel, really good counsel. Lead counsel is the attorney who got the young guy in Wisconsin.
Kyle Rittenhouse.
Yes, Kyle Rittenhouse, who got him off. Okay. So we got some good counsel now. So hopefully, that cease and desist order, the problem is the cease and desist order has muddied the water for the PMA. And so if we can get rid of the cease and desist order and go back to the fundamental PMA structure and let that go to court, then we're going to have a win. Or at least we're going to have something definitive. Right now, the cease and desist order is bigger than the PMA question. And all of us that are promoting PMAs and have seen them work and so far win in courts, we're desperate to have this case go to trial to get a definitive precedent on the PMA, but we got to get the cease and desist order out of the way first. So,
got it.
Amos is definitely our poster boy right now. We're pulling for him, and we hope that he will get to where his moral and ethical arguments can actually be litigated and not just court procedure when you sign this order.
Because he had, I think it was 4,000 members of his PMA.
That's right.
And they're saying, look, I'm consciously choosing to buy my meat, eggs, milk from you because I want them as God intended. I don't want them sprayed with certain chemicals. Right. And they would have those chemicals sprayed on them if it was a USDA processing facility. Is that correct?
Well, yes and no. I mean, that's a little bit gray, but the fact is, freedom of food choice is perhaps one of the most intimate, personal decisions that a person can make. And when the government reaches into my mouth, I call that an invasion of privacy. And so my position is that as consenting adults, if we want to voluntarily engage in commerce, we should be able to engage in commerce as consenting adults, exercising our freedom of choice, without a bureaucrat being involved. Now, we have to understand that where our culture is right now with healthcare and the government intervention and dominance of healthcare, our official cultural position now is you don't own you. I don't own me. I am a part of a societally collective organism. And so if I engage in risky behavior like drinking raw milk or eating uninspected chicken, if I engage in what the orthodoxy of the culture views as risky behavior, that's not just if I want to hurt myself, let me hurt myself. It's now an economic liability on you, because if I hurt myself, you have to take care of me. And so people don't realize that when you start down this government interventive path, the ramifications become profound down the line and show up in things like this. And so, yeah, so here we are with this kind of thing. I will tell you that we've got Nick Freitas, who's a delegate here in Virginia, is, as we speak, putting in a bill for this next General Assembly in the spring to allow customers to sign a waiver, a hold harmless waiver. And that would be a remedy as well, if it could be recognized. The biggest problem here is the federal government domination of what should be a state and local jurisdiction. So when I was in Richmond one time testifying, we had a cottage food bill going in, and I was testifying down there, and the head of meat and poultry inspection for Virginia, during a break, he came over and talked to me. He said, Joel, we can't let people decide what to eat. He said, we couldn't build enough hospitals fast enough to handle all the sick people that would be getting, dirty, tainted, pathogen food. Now, I disagree completely with that, because I think small farmers like us who don't have a bunch of attorneys and insurance companies protecting us, we're way more careful than some of the bigger outfits, and we don't engage in some of the risky stuff that they do either, like 24/7 breathing in fecal particulate in a confinement house. All right, ours have fresh air and sunshine and grass. Okay, so on its surface, we're not as toxic or pathogenic. But without regard to that, the problem is I cannot argue against him on that point, because there's no experiment that's been allowed. What we need right now is for somebody, Congress, to say, if a locality wants to have an unregulated food commerce within their jurisdiction, we give them the freedom to do so, and we're not going to come in and shut them down. Then, if our county wanted to try it, and suddenly people started getting sick from bad food, well, okay, I'm wrong, because I really think people would eat way better, be less sick, and we'd need fewer hospitals if we had unregulated direct. I'm not saying we'll supply Walmart. I'm saying direct producer-consumer transaction. But we can't even try the experiment, because the federal government comes in and dominates and says you can't. And so we're really under a thumb here that's a problem, and in our lack of experimentation. When our country was founded, it was envisioned as a 50-state experiment. There was very little power arrogated to the federal level, very little. We didn't have a Department of Education, didn't have a Department of Housing, didn't have a Department of Health and Human Services, didn't have USDA, didn't have, all right, just name there was none of this. States did it, and so if a state wanted to have a Department of Education, they could do their education. If another state said, you know what, I don't think the state has anything to do with education, so we're going to make our taxes low enough that parents can pay for their own education. Another state says, well, we think that there is some societal requirement for kids' education, so what we'll give vouchers to parents, and they can spend them wherever they want to. If a parent wants to send their kids to an atheist Vietnamese bow-legged school, they can send their kids to an atheist Vietnamese bow-legged school, okay? And so you have these multiple experiments. Every states can watch each other. Oh wow, their kids are doing better on the SAT. Or wow, they don't have any juvenile detention centers. Their teenage suicide rate's going down. I wonder why. Well, maybe it's because that state has the 10 Commandments in the class. Imagine, I mean, people that extol the virtues of diversity have arrogated to a one-size-fits-all federal level all of these things that our founders imagined being organic experiments and let's try different things. And so, that's our fundamental problem right now, which is, and frankly, I'm not optimistic that that's going to change anytime soon. I think the power irrigation in Washington is just on a juggernaut, and it's just going to get worse before it finally collapses. And so that's why I don't have enough energy and time to sit here, complaining about all that. I'm putting all my attention and energy on let's start these young farmers, let's get these entrepreneurs going, let's build direct alliance, transactions, and let's just build a parallel universe that doesn't need Putin and doesn't need Fauci and doesn't need any of these people and doesn't need hospitals very much, okay? And let's just build a parallel universe.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying is top-down problems can't really be solved by top-down solutions.
That's right. That's That's Einstein's theory of insanity, right? Trying to fix things with the same thing that created the problem. And I'm a big believer in bottom up. If we've got a top-down issue, the solution is going to be bottom up.
Well, it's great to see the trajectory of everything and just seeing a younger generation interested in this stuff. Yeah. And I think a lot of that is due to a lot of the work that you've put out there and just your ability to continue to educate on these topics. So we're just grateful that you've opened your doors to us and come back on our podcast for a round two. So just really thankful for this conversation and just all the information you put out there. It's been a huge inspiration for us.
Great. Well, it's been a privilege and an honor, and blessings on you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Time Joel. To go move some cows or what?
I don't think I'm going to move them today. They've got plenty, and I'm just going to let them rest overnight. I'll move them tomorrow.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, Joel. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joel.